Hey everybody, it's Carm here. I'm coming to you on a Thursday morning. In lieu of the boys not being here with me, yeah, a couple of friends out there have been asking about them and missing singing them in the videos since I've been pretty much obsessed with doing early morning videos out here. So yeah, in lieu of them, yeah, found these. It was around Christmas time of last year. This neat little kind of novelty shop out in a town called Wheaton, which I like to visit from time to time, and a couple bucks each. I confess this fuzzy here didn't come like this. He was completely gray, and eventually used some whiteout to get something closer to his accurate markings. So yeah. They both adorn my each of my speakers, my stereo setup. So kind of like my listening mascots for a while now. So yeah, I'm going to come back on with a few more listens throughout the week, among other things. I'll just start right in. MJQ Space, or Modern Jazz Quartet, 1969 on Apple. It's a neat thread going around on notable record label designs. Of course, iconic label here. So, yeah, very cool. Modern Jazz Quartet as a group, I haven't really explored that fully over the years, just here and there. And actually, Gary did a Cosmic Pickle / Gary H's Hip Road, did a video on them not long ago. He didn't have it in the title, but he featured them throughout, just talking about them. And so it isn't a group I've really explored deeply over the years. You could say more of a traditional conservative jazz sound in a sense, at least on the surface, kind of blended in with classical influence, kind of like chamber music. I'd say this, from the few things I've heard, it goes into more experimental territory for them. Yeah, John Lewis piano, Milt Jackson vibraharp, Percy Heath bass, and Connie Kay drums. Mixture of originals and standards. And starting right in with a couple of John Lewis pieces. Visitor from Venus, Visitor from Mars. Both starting in with these kind of electronic effects. I'm guessing done by tape, tape manipulation, almost sounding like Moog synthesizer at times. But it's not credited as anyone playing synthesizer. Kind of a slowing down and speeding up or reconstituting, especially with the vibes, kind of like a processed vibes of that time. And then it goes into the piece. Yeah, Visitor from Venus, going a little more into their traditional sound, their instrumentation, swinging a little bit more, but still having a kind of dreamy, kind of a surrealistic effect, especially the way the vibes are approached here, the way the notes are allowed to kind of echo and decay. Yeah, it's almost like hearing this music through a dream, or it's like when you see those movies or shows where the person is talking about reliving an old memory, and you hear the harp or the vibe sound, and everything gets very cloudy, and then you see them, what they're imagining, what they're talking about. This music has that kind of conjures that feeling of you relating a dream or a memory. Visitor from Mars, again starting off more experimental, but then it goes into a pretty hard swinging number. Not quite bluesy, but definitely a little more traditional approach. Then you have Here's That Rainy Day, the old standard by Burke and Van Huysen, which again, more of a blues-based standard, more conventional. But you can still hear, you'll still hear a little of the undercurrent of experimentation here. Throughout the album, there's this kind of bell-like effect that kind of comes in and out at different times. Almost somewhere between like a kind of a higher register Tibetan bell and like a little bicycle bell, like a children's bicycle that's on the handlebars that kind of goes jing, kind of has that sound throughout. And there's other times where I think they're using a triangle, just playing it a certain way. And then on the second side we have Dilemma by a composer who I cannot pronounce. Again, more of a kind of traditional jazz piece, similar to the previous standard. But again, it's a really nice mixture of kind of swinging jazz and a little something more impressionistic, which I think they did quite well in equal measure. It's very refined and some could say cerebral, but there's also a nice blend of that and a real feeling there. But just very subtle and quiet for the most part. Easy to overlook, because it's not maybe not as dynamic as some may like in certain, if you want to call it post bop or what have you. But yeah, there's lots of little layers there, and then concludes with an all-time favorite piece of mine personally, Adagio from Concerto di Aranjuez by Rodrigo. Beautiful rendition here. Yeah, 10-minute version here. If you know that piece, very beautiful, lilting, gently unfolding, melancholy, and the way they do it, they really stretch it out and allow the piece to kind of unfold on its own. Playing it fairly straight for the most part, and actually the second half it almost takes on kind of a Middle Eastern quality, more improvisatory, but again very searching it out, feeling it out very gradually, but still kind of taking risks along the way, which again from what I've heard of them over the years, you have to listen a little closer for those moments which are maybe a little more on the edge. It's not always real apparent with other groups as it is with other groups, but it's worth exploring with them, I'm finding. And there's still so much I need to hear from this group in general. So a kind of belated thanks to Gary for reminding me of this group. And yeah, I've had this for a while and I've been neglecting it for a while, so happy to revisit it here. Say MJQ, Modern Jazz Quartet, Space, 1969. And next up, another one I hadn't played in quite a while. And thinking of Gary again, I know this is a favorite of his, artist in the label. You have Paul Bley, acoustic and electric piano, Bill Connors, acoustic guitar, and Jimmy Giuffre on a variety of woodwinds, mostly clarinet, primarily a clarinetist, also some flute, sounds like a standard flute as well as bass flute, and some saxophone. I really like this cover here. Representation of the musicians here. It's on the Improvising Artists label, which is Paul Bley's own label of the time. A rather short-lived label. I think it only went from the mid to late 70s. And the cover is done by someone named Carol Goss. Yeah, and again, they always had the really neat covers, whether it was painted or the photography. Do a lot of interesting things with photography. I'll show you the label. I like their label. This label's really pretty neat. A little more subdued. Yeah, IAI there. Yeah, Improvising Artists Incorporated. There's the artists here. Jimmy and Paul and Bill. I really like this here with Paul and his got the keys and the glasses. And as you'd expect, a very improvisatory album. Individual pieces are credited to individual members. Sometimes it's solo pieces, different configurations of duo and trio. I'd say for whoever's credited to the piece, it sounds like at the most it would be kind of ahead of the piece, or maybe just a like a very sparse sketch in which the rest of them improvise off of. Doesn't sound like it's really a fleshed out composition. It sounds very collective overall. Yeah, the solo piece is Jimmy Giuffre on flute, which someone who's added over the years, he had added on instruments in a very subtle way. Again, starting off with clarinet, but as the years went by, He's adding various other saxophones, flutes, and on here it's a really nice, very kind of plaintive solo. You know, it sounds improvised. Duet, which kind of carries over from that piece with Bill Connors on guitar, and it sounds like he's switching to bass flute for this one. The interaction overall between the musicians here, kind of like similar to the modern jazz quartet, there's a lot of space involved, a lot of patience, allowing the music to unfold, listening to each other. You know, it's not like some improvisatory music can be kind of bashing you over the head with it, or trying to make your statements really fast and hard in a way. But it's, you know, kind of like the title. It's much quieter and more subdued. Play Blue is a solo piece by Paul. I just love his playing. Have for many years. Something about his pacing and his sense of tone and dynamics, and just how he allows the piece to kind of flesh out on its own. Even when he's at his most free, there's always a sense of restraint and in control, and he kind of knows where he wants to go, even if he doesn't know exactly where it's going to end up. You know, he always has that. Clarinet solo by Jimmy, very short solo there. It's kind of a middle and far eastern vibe. Love his tone, very beautiful, rich tone. If you're looking to get into clarinet, you know, he's a good player to get into. Both what he does lyrically, you know, melodically, but also for improvisation. Just so many different approaches. Yeah, guitar, that's a fun piece. A trio between them. Paul he introduces some Fender Rhodes on this piece too, which he plays kind of on and off throughout. And at some point, someone actually says "yeah, guitar" in kind of a mocking way, like, you know, just having a little fun. I don't know if it's him or not, but yeah, going between Bill's acoustic guitar and you know, Jimmy's clarinet again. And Carol's a solo piece by Paul, kind of mixing in acoustic and electric piano. Again, very slow and gradual. And Trio has all of them coming back with Jimmy on saxophone this time. And again, the interaction, even in this really short piece, there's so much going on, but yet in a very subtle and gradual way. Inside 2 opens up with Goodbye. Absolutely gorgeous piece by Gordon Jenkins. Another one very wistful and melancholy. Now, I originally heard this piece on an album an early album that Paul and Jimmy were on. It was actually 2 albums they did with Steve Swallow called Fusion and Thesis, which was later reissued as 1961 on ECM, which is an all-time favorite album of mine. And they did a rendition of Goodbye, which is where I first heard it. Just beautiful, very keening, and again, just lovely, romantic in a way, but also, you know, quite wistful. And you have the 3 of them on there. And Laurent, another Paul Bley. I think I remember this being a solo piece. Again, going between the various keyboards. And then Quiet Song, which sounds to be in 2 parts, where Paul is playing acoustic the first part and electric in the second part. And then on here, they're really stretching out together as a trio. Again, allowing for a lot of space in between what they're doing. You know, an example of the silence really being as important as what you're hearing, the notes. I would think of it almost like allowing the silence to be a 4th member, in a sense. You know, the way they're interacting with it, and just allowing it to kind of determine what comes next. Again, without really forcing anything. But yeah, really nice, nice example of this kind of improvisation, which again, you know, isn't kind of you know, clubbing you over the head, but, you know, allowing you to, beckoning you in rather than, you know, pushing things towards you. So yeah, Paul Bley, Bill Connors, and Jimmy Giuffre, A Quiet Song, an IAI from I think it's from 1975, 75 or 76, I think it's 75. And finally here, another a personal favorite, which I come back to over the years. A very personal one for me too, because I had been introduced to this album by a dear friend who's no longer with me. I've been visiting for many years in Arizona. A lot of common ground in so many ways. And musically, it had started off that way, 30 years ago probably. Yeah, Daniel Kolbialka, Timeless Motion. You have a special extended version of the Pachelbel canon. This is the first time I had ever heard the Pachelbel canon. If you know that piece, just absolutely beautiful. Really does make you think of being on the surf. It's a very warm, lilting, romantic piece. Maybe even effusively so, in a sense. You could say the heart is on the sleeve very much with that piece, and does an even slower version if you know the original, the different variations of it, but stretching it out further and further. Daniel Kolbialka playing violin, wonderful violin player, played with a lot of different people, Aaron Copland among others, Leonard Bernstein. You have Andy Kullberg, who's an arranger, producer, and co-composer on the lullaby piece and synthesizer. Larry Blackshear on vibraphone, and two Fender Rhodes players, Don Haas and Phil Aberg, who I believe must be the same Phil Aberg from Windham Hill. Played acoustic piano on there. So yeah, starting with Pachelbel canon, starts in with Rhodes and some vibes, very very quiet, subtly shifting chords, very gradually, just kind of allowing it to unfold on its own. Definitely not rushing at all. And then Daniel's violin coming in. It sounds like these layered notes, playing the same thing, but just almost like an orchestra or like a string section. And then as it goes further, starts soloing over that piece. Again, the overlaid pieces, playing the lead melody, but still keeping that continuity going. And with the other instruments just kind of really just like slow waves in the background, just as a perfect bed for what he's doing. Just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous rendition of that piece. In side two, you have Timeless Motion, which I thought they were reversed doing. Yeah, Timeless Motion. Another very beautiful, very, very quiet. Really kind of almost on the surface, it's almost static sounding, where you have his violin just kind of playing a very slow, undulating note throughout, or maybe a series of notes, but very, very slow and gradual. And there's kind of a sustained. The synthesizer almost has kind of an organ sound to it, like a high-end organ. And then Lullaby, very much like the title, very swaying. More of a feature for the Rhodes. Whereas again, his playing is a little bit more as a backdrop. And the keyboards aren't playing solos so much, but they're just taking a little bit more of a lead, just as far as kind of prominence in the mix. But yeah, just absolutely beautiful. That combination of instruments brings me back to speaking of Harold Budd again from the last video, his early Pavilion of Dreams, which has a lot of Rhodes and vibes on there, as well as Marion Brown saxophone. That kind of brings to mind what they were doing, played in a more ethereal way. Yeah, the way the Fender Rhodes are being approached on here is definitely not in like a jazzy or funky way. It is more like someone like Stephen Halpern. Again, just allowing the notes to kind of decay and reverberate on their own, hearing kind of the texture of the tones, so to speak. But yeah, just an absolutely gorgeous album. This was used for years by, if you're familiar with Dr. Bernie Siegel, who had worked with cancer patients, among others, helping them to heal as much as possible, and work on the mind and body connection. Just a real healer. He would use these in his. He would make these tapes, kind of guided meditation, for health and well-being, and he would have This piece in particular, the pocketball cannon, he'd have that in the background. You know, he would just talk over it, and it was just perfect. But you could listen to it either way. It's really has that same effect. Just very beautiful and healing and restorative. So yeah, Daniel Kolbialka, Timeless Motion from 1982. Oh, show the label on this too. Much simpler label, but yeah, it's on the Lysem label, which I think may still be around, because he's still around and recording, as far as I know, and made a lot of albums in this vein. It'd be a mixture of these kind of slow, undulating interpretations of classical pieces, along with his own compositions. But, yeah, wonderful stuff here. I feel like a different side of violin too, and this kind of orchestration, much slower and more gradual. I'll definitely get into this. So yeah, I just want to come out and share these again among other listens. Always something, always checking into something, and of course being influenced and inspired by those of you out there and making videos and doing features. I think you know who you are. So yeah, lots to enjoy. So get back to more listening and just hanging out as the day is unfolding. It's gorgeous out, mostly sunny. Had a couple days of rain and overcast and kind of on and off, but it's perfect now and very cool. It's got to be in the low 70s. But we'll see what comes later. So okay, from the representatives of the crew inside, I hope we're all well, and thank you for watching, and till the next one. Peace, love, and joy.